Hi Rahul. Hello. Hi all. I hope you have joined and you can see my screen. Hello. He cannot try and speak. I've just unmuted you. I think you all are joining in still, so I'll just wait. Oh, very good. Uh, it seems majority is able to hear me and see my screen as well. Give me 1 minute. Isha is asking what is password. Passcode is shared on email itself or in the meeting invitation. Very good. So, fine. Let her try to join in. In the meanwhile, just quickly go through, but maybe we can just wait for 2 minutes. Let's wait for 2 minutes. I sincerely hope everyone is able to see my screen. Because if that is not working, then there is no point. I'll go on mute for 1 minute. We'll let Isha join in and then we'll start. Okay, I see Isha has joined in as well. Let the others join in as they see fit. Let's start because we have limited time. So just to set the background, I'll share the recordings in certain way if it is really possible. I'll figure out a way to share the recordings. Meanwhile, we'll do this every day. The timings will change 8:30 to 9. That's going to be the new time. Half an hour is what is the limit we have. We may want to extend it until 40 minutes, but then we all will be disconnected. So that's the limitation. The third thing, we will continue as per planned, and then I will be sharing my notebooks and the code that we're going to write. I'll request every one of you, if not already done, I know Rohi and Rahul may have already done this. Please register in HackerRank because that's where you can practice a lot on the programming language. But don't overdo it. That's what my suggestion is. So keeping that in mind, let's give it a start. So we have already seen the dictionaries earlier, right? So we have seen cases where we have created the dictionaries. So let me just create another dictionary quickly because I want to show you there is something which we can do on top of a dictionary, which is really interesting and that will be much used when it comes to data science. So let's say I want to create a dictionary which is that of my customer. So just write this: creating a new dictionary. Uh, we will store our customers, right? So the first entry I see, I think I can give, let's say, customer name. I'll give my last name. And then the next entry, let's say, uh, I can give some kind of an ID. Let's say 111. And then the third is, let's say, customer age. And this will be, let's say, 36. Right. So this is a very simple, uh, very simple dictionary. Let's check the contents. Checking the contents of the dictionary. Sorry. So this is my cust and I press enter. So give me 1 minute. There is some problem which Saransh is trying to report. I will just reply to him. Please. Oh, sorry. Sorry, I typed in the wrong place. Please use VPN. Okay, fine. So now the reason why I created this thing is because I wanted to show you there is a variation of Python dictionaries as well, which I don't know if you have already explored. So as of this time, what we already know is that if I want to select a particular value, sorry, of any key within the dict, then what I usually do is my cust and I select the key name. So I say cust underscore name and I press enter and I can see what is the value for that key. Now this is quite clear. This is how I can see the dictionary. I can use the dictionary. I know this already. Now can I extend this idea to a dictionary which is going to contain a lot of records of the customer? The answer is yes. One way to do this is something like this. Let's create a new dict. I'll call this dict so that I have to type less. Give me 1 minute. So let's create a new dict, and here we will store more than one, let's say, I don't know, students. Okay, so I'm going to create a new dictionary called my students. Okay, and this dictionary will be multi-line. So that's why I have entered something like this. So first field will be ID, and ID, let's say, I don't know, I have how many? 5 students. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? So this is the first field, I can say. In the dictionary, the first key is this. As you can see, the value to the first key is not a single value, but a list of values. So this is also possible in the dictionary, that a key can have a list of values. How we are going to use that is something very interesting. We are going to look at that when we start playing with the dictionary, and then we are going to introduce a concept of a data frame. That's what I have already written there. So next is, let's say, I don't know, student name, let's say. Okay, so I'll create a list and I'll say A is one student, B is another student, C is another student. Give me 1 minute, friends. This is really annoying. Yeah. D is another student and E is another student. Sorry for not taking your names. So this are 5 students that I have, and then let's say, sorry, I forgot a comma. Hello.
और जो तेरी खाना जो है सीधा खाया तूने खाया नहीं वो तूने बाद में खाया उसमें उससे पहले
Is anyone speaking? No. Fine. Just continue. So after student name, so one thing that I wanted you to notice, after every line I'm putting a comma. Third, last but not the least, let's say course name. In which course are they enrolled? I'm a very big trainer these days. So let's say the first course is course 1, second course is course 2, third course is course 3, fourth course is course 4, and fifth course is course 5. Okay, so there are 5 courses in which 5 students A, B, C, and D with IDs 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 respectively are enrolled. So this is a dictionary that I've created. Let me check if I'm able to get the values. The answer is yes. Now, when we are going to work with Python, when we are going to work with the data analysis side of things, there is one very, very important data structure that we're going to use, and that data structure is otherwise known as a data frame. A data frame is nothing but a representation of a table. So I'll just write that here. Data frame is a representation of tabular data, usually what we find in databases or Excels, right? So that or I'll not write so that, I'll say if we find a good way to represent this type of data and then have the capabilities to play around it. Just a moment. Play around, if then have the capabilities to play around it, then we can, I'll say, easily perform data analysis. Let me just do one thing here. I'll just put one more. So the idea here is this data structure, otherwise known as a data frame, will be a representation of the tabular data, which we usually find inside a database, or we may find it inside a CSV file, we may find it inside a table in a database, and so on, or an Excel sheet, right? So if we can find a good way to represent this data, then it will be very beneficial for us, and then we can do a lot of good things with it. So that's what we are going to see now. I'll quickly introduce what is a data frame, and I'll also introduce you to a library that we are going to extensively use when we are going to talk about, let's say, data frames. Give me 1 minute. Okay, so the library that I was talking about, very important and very powerful library, something that we are going to use almost all of the time. So even if we are doing a one-time kind of a machine learning thing, even if we are doing just a hobby project, we are going to do this, and we are definitely going to do this. So this library is called pandas, and usually we represent it as PD. So that's the short form of that library. So this is how we import that library. So because this is the first time I'm trying to import it in my notebook, as you can see, it has turned on a star mark. It's going to take some time to validate whether I have that library with me or not. If I do, it is going to be loaded. So let's give it some time. In the meanwhile, let me explain. This library is really, really important when it comes to data analysis. And this is really, really powerful because it is in the background written in very, very powerful and fast libraries. And using those libraries, it is, or I should rather say, it becomes very easy to do the analysis. I see that it is loaded now, so let's start using it. But uh, the only thing I wanted to mention, and I am going to write that to you in my email as well. I'm going to give you the name of a book. I'm sure you can find it on the internet as a PDF. So give it a look. It's a brilliant book. I would strongly recommend each and everyone to have that book with you handy. It's kind of a reference book. You do not need to study it from page number 1 until page number last, but it's a very good kind of a reference, because without the data analysis, as we are going to see in the next set of our days, is that without doing data analysis, we won't be able to achieve anything when it comes to machine learning and when it comes to data science. Right. So let me just quickly check what is the situation with participants. Okay, no. I was just checking if Saransh was able to join, but the answer is no. So we will try to now use our favorite dictionary, which is the one that I've created above, right? My students. I'm going to use my students as a data frame. And how we do that is PD is the library that I've imported. It's the name that I've given. So library is pandas. I've given it an alias PD. Inside PD, there is a function called the data frame. That's all we are going to call. So what I'm going to say in the brackets, I'm going to call the variable. So once I pass the variable, as you can clearly see, let me scroll down. This data that was part of a dictionary. Okay, people who are comfortable reading JSON files or reading dictionaries will be able to read this quite well. But now this becomes easy for anyone to read, right? You have a table which has 3 columns. Now, one thing that we need to take care of, there is an extra column which is added. I did not add that, but it is automatically added by Python. This is called the index column. So what happens is, let's say, I'll say students. If I say this is students and then make a print, I'm sure I will be able to get the same output. But then the reason why I want to store this in a variable is because, let's say, I want the first rows of this data frame, right? I just want to know what is the first rows of this frame. So what I'm going to do in that case is, this is called students. What happens if I say 0, right? If I say 0, it is trying to find the 0th element, right? And then it gives an error. The reason why it gives an error, you can see key error 0. This is really interesting to see why this field over here, 0 1 2 3 4, it is the key. We already have the keys. We know that in Python the key starts with 0. As we increment, the value is going to increment, right? So we start with 0. First entry is always at index 0, and then we add up. Okay. Now the index is equal to 0. We already know that. But then why am I not able to fetch the data if I do 0? And that is the main reason here. Because a data frame usually almost always contains more than one column, this command is actually confusing for Python. And that's the reason why, because we have created a data frame with the name students using the library PD. PD has given these is a variable students a bit of a capability. So when I say capability, what I mean by that is, and we are going to look at this when we look into object-oriented programming briefly. We are really not going to do a deep dive in object-oriented programming because it's not really required when it comes to practical data science. We should be aware of that, but it is not that much required as far as I have seen. So we will do a brief, but we are not going to do a deep dive in that. But we already know, maybe some of us know, that in object-oriented programming, we have a concept of class, which is the skeleton, which is, let's say, the blueprint of a human being. So I can say that, let's say, let me take a pen. So let's say I have a class that belongs to a human being. So a human being, or the skeleton of a human being, can be called a class. And from there, I can create multiple objects. Okay, I can create multiple objects, or maybe this is not a human being. Maybe this is a wrong word to say. Let's say this is a mammal. Okay, so a class can represent a mammal, and then the objects that result out of a mammal are the different types of mammals which can exist, right? So even human beings are mammals. So we are actually one of them. Then there can be other objects, and so on and so forth. Now, the reason why I briefly touched on this is because, if let's say this class of mammal has a property called stomach, right? So every mammal may have a stomach. So this object can inherit that method. So automatically, without doing anything, this method comes onto all the objects. Or maybe mammal has an object called, I don't know, fingers or ribs. Very bad examples I'm taking. But let's say it has any object here, or any method which is part of that class. So any object which is created out of the class is going to get that method as well, right? So the reason why I explained this to you is because uh, clear all drawings here. So let me just go back and put this back. So the reason why I explained this is because when we have created a data frame called students, this is actually a data frame. You can also see the type here. Okay, if I execute this, you can see the type is pandas core frame data frame, but it has got some features which is similar to an object, as if it is an object created out of a class. Example given, I want to know what are the top 5 fields or top 5 rows which are there in this data frame, or maybe the top 2 rows. I have only 4 rows, right? So I'll take the top 2 rows. So I can call a function, as you can see over here, called head. So I can simply do a dot, as if students is like a library. Students is like an object, and I'm calling a method on top of that object. And if I simply say head, it gives me the first 2 rows, right? So this is one way of calling the data which is there inside a data frame. Then there are other things that we can do. Let's say I want to know all the names. I want to know the names of all my students. So students, and then a bracket similar to lists, and then we have single quotes, and then we have the name of the column. So if I do that, I get a list. I actually get a series. Actually, this is actually called a series. So it's a series of all the possible values which are there inside the data frame when I've restricted myself to a name. Okay, so this is one way of doing it. Then there are similarly, let's say let's find all the ages. Then what should I do? I'll say students, and then what is the name? No, I don't have age, right? So I have course name. Sorry, I have course name. So I can say course name, and I can just see what all are the course names which are here, right? So this is what I could do with the data frames, right? So if I select the columns, I can get the values of that columns. I select the column here, I get the value of another column. Now there are a few other very important things. I just wanted to show you one as of now, because we don't have much time. I need to take a few questions from you as well if you have any questions. So just before we end, we give a concept of what is a data frame. It's as simple as a representation of tabular data. Objects created as form of a data frame. By type, they are a data frame, but they get some special abilities just like objects. We also saw earlier that we can create a dictionary where each key can have multiple items, which are iterable items, and then I using that uh, dictionary, and we are going to see other ways as well in future. We are going to import files, we are going to import Excel sheets, we may import, let's say, data from a database, and so on and so forth. So there are multitude of other ways in which this thing can work. pd.data frame is not only about passing a variable which is a dictionary. There are far more options here. We'll have a look into all the let's say important ones. Okay, so we will have a look into all the important ones. After which we saw that there is a function called head, by means of which I can see the top two rows. Then I can select records based on column name. I can do also, can I see the last two records? Okay, can I do that? If there is a head in every coin, if there is a head, then there will be a tail as well. So in this case as well, there is also a tail. If I do a tail, I can see the last two rows, right? So I do a tail 2 and I see the last two rows. So in this way, a data frame is really very powerful. We are going to look at a lot more inside a data frame. Right now, this is all I would like to tell you. This is the most fundamental, let's say, data structure when we are going to play with any data. And the most important command, one of the most frequently used, I'll say command, and I'll also say function or maybe method, which is used along any data frame. Okay, so using any data frame, you will do this command when you are doing a data analysis, and that is students.info with brackets, nothing inside it, no parameter. Okay, let's see what this comes up. First of all, it tells it is a class. You see, I told you that it's part of a class. It's not really a simple object. It's kind of a composite variable type inside this language. So it is of type underscore frame data frame, but it is really like an object. So students is actually an object of that class. Then I have a range index. What is this? Range index tells me how many entries are there in the data set. So 0 to 4, these are the indexes of the data. Is that really the case? Let me just quickly print the set and see if it is matching. See, so there are 5 rows, 0 to 4. So I say 5 entries ranging 0 to 4. I have data columns which are total 3 columns. So it is clearly telling me there are 3 columns in my data set, right? First column is ID, second is name, third is course name. I already know that because I've created it. Every column has 5 values. This value that is printed over here is almost always the non-null values. Example given. In this data frame, had it been the case that D and E are missing, this is a very common situation in any practical data set. The data in any row, in any column, any particular situation might be missing. Example given, let's say this data is collected as part of a survey. The person who is doing a survey forgot to enter a data, or maybe at the time when he was entering the data, he's using some kind of a device, and the device has lost the internet. So maybe he's on a very a secluded place, and he's doing a survey. He's entering all the details inside his tab, and unfortunately, at the same time, at the very time when he's entering details about I don't know, Rahul, and he has lost the internet connection. So what happens is, let's say if this is the entry for Rahul, index 3 or a student ID 4, then maybe his name or the course for which he enrolled was not captured. Hence, this results into null, right? So this 5 non-null means in ID I have 5 values. At max I can have only 5, and all of them are not null. I do not have even a single value which is null, right? This is really important when you are looking at a data set. This clearly tells you how many rows you have, how many columns you have, and what all data you have in there, and the data type, and how much of that is empty. We are going to do a lot of empty value treatment, otherwise known as missing value treatment. So data engineering will come into picture here. We are going to see how we are going to handle such kind of cases where data is missing. Either are we going to ignore those rows, are we going to impute some value, are we going to simply accept that there can be null, and so on and so forth. So we have to do a lot of data preparation. We'll come into that at later stage, but as of now I have 5 rows, 3 columns. All of them are not null. There is not even a single null entry, and the data type for the first column is integer 64-bit. The rest two are objects. By default, every string column is named as object. This is a confusing thing. So this you must be remembering. Object is a string. It can be a categorical variable as well. So an object can be a categorical variable as well. it can be a string as well. So let's say the name of a student. Okay, it is an object. Now name may or may not be unique to everyone, but there will be lots of names. But when it comes to course name, let's say any website or any trainer will have a limited set of courses which that person is going to give. So there can be variables which are categorical in nature, if you know what I mean. We are going to look into the types of variables when we touch into statistics, but as of now, all I needed to say is that if the variable or if the column in its rows contains any string or any character type value, inclusive of a combination of characters and numbers, then clearly it's going to be an object type variable, right? You can also see the size of the data. This is how much bytes this is going to occupy in the memory, right? As of now, that's it. Let's close it here. I'll just see if there are any questions from any one of you. So I've unmuted every one of you. If you have any questions, eh, anything to ask before we close.
Hi, Bhumik.
Hello.
Yeah, I want to ask, since this ID, SNAME, and course name fields are getting added automatically,
Hmm.
so I believe they should also be having an extra entry. Like in range, I have only 5 entries, but there should be ideally 6 entries or maybe 4 columns, since there should also be a part of that.
Uh,
Mm,
I'm
That's what
sorry,
I
Rohit.
want to
Can you
ask.
please come back with the question because I just lost. Uh,
Okay, okay.
hmm,
Yeah, I'm saying that since one additional column and
hmm,
one additional row is inserted
hmm,
in this Panda framework,
correct.
so I think one additional in the answer of range index and data columns,
Hmm.
there should be 6 entries or 4 columns, or it is just implicit and we can't modify it later or what?
Yes, no, we won't be able to modify. And the reason why it is showing you, let's say, 5 entries, which is 5 rows and 3 columns, is because that's the size of the data. Okay, that's the size of the data. You can't change it. So that's the size
Okay,
of the actual data. You cannot really morph that and say that, no, I'm going to do something else. Or there is one way of doing that. Maybe I'll say, I can do one thing. There is one thing that I can do, but that's really not the answer to your question. So let's say select all students where ID of that student, right? So ID of that student is less than 4, right? So I'll say students where I know the column, the ID is a column, and I'll say less than 4, right? So what happens when I execute this is that it returns me a series of booleans. It is either true or false. True in that case when the ID is less than 4, false when it is not less than 4. So I just pass this Boolean output as an input to the student's data frame, and clearly I get a new data frame. So let's say I say that this data frame is known as top students, right? So I have these top 3 students in my in all of my classes, and these are the top 3 students. Now if I do a check on the info about the top 3 students, then what I can say, top students.info. Okay, in this case it has changed through three entries and 3 columns. Why? Because I have taken a subset of the original set. But if I have 5 rows and 5 columns, which is the actual data, you can ignore the index created by Python and the column name that you have given. The actual data is 5 rows and 3 columns, right? So it is 5 cross 3. So that's what you are
okay,
going to get here, right? And the same way you are going to get here as well. You see, 3 cross 3. Why 3 cross 3? You have selected 3 rows and we have 3 columns. So 3 cross 3.
okay, okay.
Does that answer?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Anyone else? Maybe we can continue for some time because I just got a notification that the limit of that 40-minute is taken over. Right. So let's do a few and then maybe we can close. Yeah. So let's look at a few more. Okay. So although I don't have such an example, let me just download such an example. Okay. Or maybe give me 1 minute. I'll just pause the sharing and I will do a task. Is that I am going to take some data. Let's see if I'm able to read that data. Okay, fine. Fine. Okay, now I'm going to resume. So what I did in the meanwhile is that I copied a file from one of my folders and I've put it over here. So let's see how a pandas data frame can be conceived, I'll say, when or if I want to read a CSV file. So I'll take a very simple example. Let's say we all know the name of the company known as, let's say, Walmart. So Walmart has a lot of stores. Let's say there is some kind of a CSV file where they have stored a list of all the stores where they have their footprint. Okay, so I want to read that data. So I'll just quickly show you. In this folder, I have stored a stores.csv. I hope you can see that. So other than my Word document, which has the notes, it may not have the notes related to data frame. So I'll update that and I'll share you shortly. And I have the IPYNB. This is the extension for the IPython notebook. And then I have placed a stores.csv. So what I can do, I want to read this data. Let me give it a name stores, and I can say pd.data frame, and I'll simply pass the name of this file. Okay, I clearly see there is some problem. Constructor not properly called. Why is this the case? Stores.csv is already there. Let me try to figure out. Let me try to figure out why this is the case. Oh yes, of course, yes. So I'll just show you what mistake I did. I'm trying to read this file as a data frame, right? But what I need to do instead is that a data frame constructor can only work when you have already read the data. So that is one limitation you can see. So data frame constructor can only work when we have read the data. Hence, this line gives an error. So what do we do to solve that problem? So let's then first read the CSV file and then we will create the data frame. Okay, so what do I do? Stores is equal to pd. There is a function called read.csv. I'm going to read the CSV file like this. Okay, it is still throwing me the error because this line I have not actually commented. So let me comment that line. And then let's go to this line and let's check if I have read the data properly or not. So stores, and I press enter and I can see that I have read a list of all the stores. I'm not able to understand what this data means. I don't know what is the meaning of type and what is the meaning of size. We are going to figure that out as part of our analysis. That's what we do, right? If we are not able to understand the data, we figure out what it is. So we may want to figure that out at a later stage, but at this point in time, what I wanted to show you is as simple as we have a data set which gives you the number of stores or the list of stores which are there for a company. In this case, it's a Walmart, and I want to know what is the store ID, the type of the store, and let's say some other details which are there inside the CSV. I want to read that as a pandas data frame, and that's exactly what I've done here. So let me see if I've done that properly. So no, let me say type. I can see that it is already being read as a data frame. So When I execute read.csv or read_csv, it has read the data, right? And it has read the data as a data frame. So it has already stored my data as a data frame. Let's see if I can do similar operations with that data. Let's see, can I then read the first few sample rows? You'll come to know why I wrote few. If I do stores and head, and I do not pass anything in between this bracket, then what happens is by default, index 0 until index 4 is going to be printed, which means top 5 rows are going to be printed. Same happens for tail. By default, tail and head returns top 5 and last 5 rows respectively. Okay, so stores dot tail, sorry, it should be tail. And if I do that, I can clearly see these are the last 5 rows. So in total, I can see there are 45 stores, right? And they are either of some type. I don't know what these types are. I'm going to see. And then there is a size. So let's do something more with this. Okay. We are actually supposed to look into conditional statements and things like that, but maybe we can do that uh, uh, in the next class, right? So we'll just take 5 more minutes and we'll see what we can see over here. So this is the data frame. And a stores data frame. Can we check its elementary statistics? I know we have not really covered statistics as of now, but no harm in doing a quick code to see what kind of out of the box stats we can find out. So I'll say this is the most important function for doing what is known as descriptive statistics. You may or may not know what is descriptive statistics right now, but don't worry. We are going to look into statistics and then we'll come to know. But as of now, let's say stores dot describe. Because this is descriptive statistics, the function name is also intuitive. It says describe. What it does, it is giving me some output and it is giving me some name on top, similar to the column names which I have here. So what it is doing, here I have 3 columns. Why is it printing 2? Is because store and size are the numeric columns. Descriptive statistics by its nature, as we are going to see later, only works effectively on numerical columns. We cannot do any descriptive statistics on top of, let's say, categorical column, because it does not really make sense to do that kind of statistics. So that's why this string column called type is ignored. Clearly, it identified the columns which are integers or numeric, and then it printed out some values. Now let's see what these values are. Let me just increase the zoom. Okay, so let's just quickly see what are the values, and then maybe we can wrap up. So here what we are seeing in this column store. So we will take one example here. Let me just take the pen. So in the store column, I have count of items which is 45. So there are 45 items which is present. The mean of these items is 23. What is the mean? This is something that we are going to learn, but as simple as that, it is the average. The average value of values present in store column is 23. Okay, this is important. We'll come to this. Why is this important? We will see when we are going to do data analysis. Same importance lies with STD. I'm not going to tell you what is STD right now because it is simply going to confuse you. I'll only tell you this is a measure of dispersion. We're not going to talk about it right now because it is only going to confuse you. Then I have something which is this. This is also a measure of dispersion, otherwise known as spread. How the data is spread. Okay, so the minimum value of store, this moment, no, it's not from here. The minimum, hold on, we have lost a participant. Okay, Abhay is gone. Okay, so minimum value is 1. What is this? Okay, minimum value is 1. 25% of the values lie within the range 1 to 12. 50% of the values lie within the range 1 to 23. 75% of the values lie between the range 1 to 34. So Also, or we can also say 75% of the values in the column store is actually less than or equal to 34. So that's the significance of these fields: 25%, 50%, 75%. As we'll see later on, these are also known as quartiles. So this is first quarter, this is the second quarter, this is the third quarter. You can note a very interesting thing here. The second quarter, or the 50% quarter, the value in this quarter is 23. The value of mean is also 23. This is a very important thing. I'm not going to tell you why this is important right now. We're going to look at it later. But this is really very important. And I can assure you, in real live data sets, you won't find it. You will never find this. You will seldom find a data which is so good that mean is equal to 50%. You won't find that. And then when we do the data analysis, I'll tell you why. Last but not the least, what is the max value? What is the maximum value which is present in the data, right? So this is how you can also see the statistics for size. So for each and every numeric column, had it been the case I had 20 numeric columns, it would have given me the description for all these 20 numeric columns in the same way. It's going to give me the count, the mean, the STD, which we don't know yet. We don't want to know that yet because we don't want to confuse ourselves. Then we add, and I have the minimum value, 25% range, 50% range, 75% range, and max value, right? So this is another very important function which is describe. Describe is really very important. A describe is going to come very handy when we are going to look into actual data sets, right? So this is not to be ignored. So we have seen two things: info and the describe function. Head and tail are quite easy to understand, right? I'll just take a pause of a minute. Anyone has any questions?
No questions.
Okay. Okay, I will assume that no one else has any questions, and most probably we can close the call. Maybe we can extend the timing, because I could see that this system is allowing us to go until 1 hour, but we'll see how it goes. Maybe keeping it short is going to be good rather than extending it. Fine then. I will then stop the sharing, and I will stop the meeting as well. Let's reconvene tomorrow at same time. Okay, thanks all. I'll make a close. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.